Alright, let's be real for a second. If you look at a map of the world today, England seems like that polite, slightly eccentric neighbor who's obsessed with tea and talking about the rain. But if you rewind the clock a few centuries, England was basically the guy at the party who couldn't stop picking fights. I'm talking about a 1,000-year-long grudge match that shaped the entire planet. We aren't just talking about a bit of banter over a football match here. We are talking about centuries of longbows, sinking ships, secret alliances, and enough royal drama to make a reality TV producer pass out from excitement. So, who are England's oldest enemies? And more importantly, how did a tiny island manage to stay in a state of perpetual beef with almost everyone in sight? Grab a drink, settle in, and let's dive into the chaotic history of England's greatest rivalries. You can't talk about English enemies without starting with the big one. The classic. The OG. France. If history was a movie, the relationship between England and France would be that toxic will they, won't they dynamic, except instead of dating, they just kept invading each other. This wasn't just a neighborly dispute. For a huge chunk of the Middle Ages, the English kings actually thought they were the rightful kings of France too. Imagine having a neighbor who doesn't just complain about your hedge, but insists your entire living room actually belongs to them. That was the vibe for about 100 years. Literally, they called it the 100 Years' War, though it actually lasted a bit longer because apparently, they lost track of time while shooting arrows at each other. This is where the legendary English longbow comes in. At places like Agincourt, the English were outnumbered, muddy, and tired, yet they managed to absolutely wreck the French nobility. It changed the face of warfare forever. But France isn't exactly a country that stays down. They had Joan of Arc, a teenager who heard voices and decided to lead an army to kick the English out, which is a level of confidence we can only dream of. From that point on, the rivalry became the ultimate seesaw. When France was up, England was down, and vice versa. They fought in the Americas, they fought in India, they fought in the Caribbean. Basically, if there was a piece of land with a tree on it, there was a good chance an Englishman and a Frenchman were arguing over who got to chop it down. But hey, while we're navigating through all this glorious chaos, I've got to ask, are you enjoying the ride so far? If you want to keep exploring the wildest corners of history with me, do yourself a favor and hit that subscribe button right now. It helps the channel out a ton, and you won't miss out on our next deep dive into the stories that made the world what it is today. Trust me, you don't want to be the only one at the pub who doesn't know why the British and the French are still low-key obsessed with each other. Now, while France was the constant thorn in England's side, we can't forget about the neighbors closer to home. Scotland. Now, this one is personal. This wasn't a fight over distant colonies, this was a fight for the very soul of the island. For centuries, the border between England and Scotland was essentially a giant no trespassing sign that everyone ignored. You had figures like William Wallace and Robert the Bruce, names that still make English historians a little nervous. The wars of Scottish independence were brutal, gritty, and filled with the kind of betrayals that would make George R.R. Martin blush. The English tried to hammer the Scots into submission, but the Scots had this annoying habit of refusing to give up. Even after the two countries eventually joined together in 1707, that underlying tension never truly disappeared. It just moved from the battlefield to the rugby pitch and the halls of Parliament. And then, there's Spain. Oh boy, the 16th century was a wild time to be alive. You had the Spanish Armada, which was basically the world's biggest get-lost message sent via a massive fleet of warships. Spain was the superpower of the world, fueled by gold from the Americas, and they were tired of English pirates, privateers, like Francis Drake looting their treasure ships. King Philip II of Spain decided he'd had enough and sent his invincible fleet to settle the score once and for all. But between some clever English fire ships and a massive storm that the English naturally claimed was sent by God, the Armada was decimated. This was the moment England realized they didn't just want to defend their island, they wanted to rule the waves. It sparked a naval rivalry that lasted for generations, turning the Atlantic into a giant chessboard where every move could lead to a massive sea battle. But wait, there's a plot twist. Enter the Dutch. You might think of the Netherlands as a peaceful place of tulips and bicycles, but in the 1600s, they were the ultimate maritime hustlers. They were the only ones who could truly challenge England for control of global trade. The Anglo-Dutch wars were essentially a series of high-stakes corporate takeovers carried out with cannons. At one point, the Dutch Navy actually sailed up the River Medway, right into England's backyard, and stole their flagship while the English watched in horror. It was probably the most embarrassing moment in British naval history. Eventually, they realized that fighting was bad for business, so they did the most logical thing possible. They invited a Dutch prince, William of Orange, to come over and be the King of England. If you can't beat them, let them run the country, right? As we move into the 18th and 19th centuries, the rivalry with France reached its final, epic boss battle level. Napoleon Bonaparte. This guy was the ultimate bogeyman for the English. He was conquering Europe at a record pace, and the only thing standing in his way was a stubborn island and its massive navy. This was the era of Admiral Nelson at Trafalgar and the Duke of Wellington at Waterloo. This wasn't just about territory anymore, it was an ideological clash. It was the British keep calm and carry on attitude versus Napoleon's revolutionary ambition. When Napoleon was finally defeated, it ushered in a century where Britain was the undisputed top dog, but the scars of those wars stayed in the English psyche for a long time. So, why does any of this matter today? Well, because you can still see the shadows of these old enmities in how England interacts with the world. Whether it's the complicated relationship with the European Union or the friendly but fierce sporting rivalries with the neighbors, the past isn't really the past. It's the foundation. England was forged in the fires of these conflicts. Every invasion, every sea battle, and every treaty shaped the language, the culture, and the grit of the people living on that island. They went from being a target for Vikings and Romans to being the ones building an empire that spanned the globe, and they did it by outlasting, outtrading, and occasionally outfighting their oldest enemies. It's a messy, bloody, and absolutely fascinating story that proves one thing. If you want to know who someone is, you just have to look at who they've been fighting with for 1,000 years. I'd love to hear what you think about these ancient grudges. Is the rivalry with France still the greatest in history, or do you think the inner island drama with Scotland takes the cake? Drop a comment below and let's get a conversation going. And hey, if you want to see us break down the history of another global powerhouse, let me know which one you're curious about. Thanks for hanging out with me today, and I'll catch you in the next one.